There are two parts to the collar. As you would notice, is anybody wearing a collar shirt? Yep, it's got one. So there is the collar part, which is the pointed triangular part. And this is going to be going here, right? And then turning down. But there's also this thing called the neckband, or sometimes called the collar stand, which actually gives the collar another part to sort of stand out from. And this is where also you'll have your button extension to kind of button it in the front, right? Where your neck button is. So basically what we're gonna do first thing before you sew anything is to interface your pieces. So one side of each of these has to be interfaced with your iron-on interfacing. Doesn't matter which one, because everything's the same piece, so you don't have to worry too much about that until we actually put them together. And even then, it's kind of not as big of a deal at this stage for you learning. Eventually, you like your facing to be on the under part, so this can sometimes get bubbly. I don't know if you've ever washed something and it had interfacing and it gets a little like bubbly. It can peel away and look kind of ugly and get ripples in it. So usually this is going to be on the underside. So there's a top collar and an under collar, and basically the top one should be the one that doesn't have the interfacing on it. Don't worry too much about that because it can get in the way of thinking about stuff right now, but that's essentially a general rule of thumb. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually put our collar itself together, and we're going to sew it on three sides. So we're going to sew it on the outside. So this side right here is going to get sewn into the collar stand, so you can leave that side open. We're going to sew a 1/2 inch around all of those three sides. Now, this is very important to make sure that you actually turn your corners correctly. I'm still seeing a couple people having some minor issues understanding the turning of corners. So let's just kind of remember that we're going to approach this on the straightaways with a 2.5 stitch, and then when we get close to the corner where we want to turn it, we're going to go down to a 1, and then we're going to do a diagonal stitch at the very corner. So, like I said, 1/2 inch, you can back stitch there. As I get about 1 inch away, I'm going to go down to stitch length 1. And about 1/2 inch away from my seam here, I'm going to go ahead and do 1 diagonal stitch. And remember to do this right sides together so that your interfacing ends up on the inside, because I'm going to turn this around after I'm done sewing it. So even though it looks less pointy right now, it's actually going to end up being more pointy if I do that correct turning procedure. Again, back down to 1. Do a diagonal stitch, 1 again for a little bit, about 1 inch, and then back to 2.5, and back stitch at that point. Now, before you turn it, it's important to trim and grade these seams. So remember that trimming is cutting away the excess, and this is going to make it so that there's not any bulky seams in there, making it hard for these to actually look nice and pointy. The other thing that you can do is called grading your seam. And grading the seam is trimming away one side of it so that there's less of a ridge when you actually turn this. And you can also trim the second one away a little bit to make it a little bit more, a little bit less bulky inside. And this isn't as important when you're working with a thin cotton. But if you're ever working with something that's thicker like a wool or a denim, this can be really helpful. You don't want to get too close to that seam, remember, because then we can accidentally rip through. But again, this is called grading the seams. And this is so when you turn it, those two seams don't form like a ridge when you press it. And so again, like, this can be helpful when it's thick to reduce bulk, or if you have something very thin too, that you don't actually see those ridges of the fabric when you iron them. And I chose to do it over at this machine today because I'm going to definitely need to iron and press these as I go. So it's a little bit more important. Usually I can fake it and let you guys kind of imagine that I've pressed things, but today it's important. So you're going to turn these points and push them out, and if you're going to use your scissors or a pencil or something, be very careful not to push too hard, but you can see how nice and pointy that is. And when you press this, you're going to really want to make sure that it's really opened up. So you don't want that seam to get sandwiched in there. You want to roll it to the outside and make sure that it really is on the seam.